right, welcome back to the stage, Hamish Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Lucian. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to some of you, depending on where you are in the world. I am Hamish Mackenzie, and thank you for joining us for today's session, which is Shaping the Future of Manufacturing, Human-Centric Digital Transformation, sponsored today by Tulip. And I can honestly say that in the two and a half years I've been doing this, this is probably the session I'm most excited about, simply because I don't think the human aspect of digital transformation really gets talked about enough. So really looking forward to this one. I hope you are too. First off, it'd be great if you can just tell us who you are, where you are in the chat. Always nice to get a feel for who's joining us. And while you do that, I'm just going to give a couple of points of housekeeping. As I'm sure most of you know, it's an hour session. I'll be introducing the topic. I'll be introducing our special guests. We have 4 of them today, and we'll be getting obviously a lot of insights from them. But we're also going to try and leave some time for you, the audience, to ask some questions, of course. And we'll try and get to them, as many of them as we can. If we don't get to some of them, then we will try and get you written answers after the session. So please don't hesitate, get your questions in, use the Q&A function, not the chat. It just makes it easier for us to find them. And it's more likely you'll get your question answered if you use the Q&A function. So get them in there. Don't wait till the end. Get them in as soon as a question pops up in your head, get the question in there, okay? Brilliant. So let's focus on the session. So digital transformation in manufacturing really works best when it prioritizes the people involved. And that goes all the way from the buy-in right through to the people on the shop floor, of course. And so this panel is really going to explore how we can do that, how we can drive digital transformation by prioritizing the people, focusing on high-ROI projects, creating a roadmap really that tackles the unique challenges within your operations. So we're going to be providing insights into how to build scalable systems that boost productivity, gain support across the organization, which is definitely very important, and make frontline workers also a central part of the transformation, really get buy-in from them as well. And we'll give you some practical strategies to advance your vision in that respect, and really try and keep your team engaged every step of the way as you go through this transformation. All right, so I'd like to introduce our guests now. First up, we have Brian McGarvey, Global Head of Customer Success at Tulip, our sponsor today. And in his role, Brian focuses on ensuring manufacturers achieve their production and operational goals. His team partners with customer stakeholders, ensures adoption of digital solutions like Tulip, and building effective digital transformation roadmaps. Before Tulip, Brian worked as a strategy consultant at PwC, where he focused on serving clients in manufacturing and automotive. And I'm pretty sure I can confirm this is a first for IIoT world. Brian was previously a submarine officer in the US Navy. So I'm sure Brian is going to help us dive into this topic. Sorry, Brian, I couldn't resist that one. Thank you very much for joining us. Delighted to have you here. Next, we have David Arians, who is founder of the IIoT Insider. He started career as a data scientist and got into the world of digital digitalization 2010, and very quickly became very passionate about how to integrate the human factor into those transformations. He was the Industrial Digitalization Director at BASF Antwerp until 2022. He still works there, and he's focusing on IT-OT convergence, designing the future operational data platform, as well as cybersecurity and, of course, AI. And he's also the founder, which is the capacity he's joining us in today, of the IIoT Insider, which offers insights, practical strategies, and real-life examples that empower manufacturers to lead a successful and innovative digital transformation. So thank you very much for joining us, David. Then we have Ulrich Möllmann, who's Managing Director of Möllmann Consulting International. He started his career as a chemical engineer in a production systems business in 1987, but he moved into software and digital products in around 2008. And this gave him a lot of practical experience in combining the mechanical and electrical expertise with the needs of modern production, control tools, platforms, digital products. So he kind of melded the two, if you like. And since 2018, he's been supporting companies as an independent consultant, helping them achieve a future-proof digital transformation and an efficient and accepted digital solutions set up. And that acceptance, I think, is something we're going to be talking about a lot today. And he's very heavily involved also in helping his clients bridge that gap between the IT and the OT world. So thank you very much for joining us, Uli.
Yeah.
And on the client side, we also have Audrey van der Castle, who is Senior Director of Operational Excellence Technology at Stanley Black & Decker. She leads a cross-functional team serving manufacturing and distribution locations globally, and driving digital transformation through solution-oriented tech program management. She's really dedicated to advancing the manufacturing industry one digitized process at a time, something we discussed in my last session actually, about doing things one at a time and not trying to do it all at once, and really making the whole employee experience better while going through this digital transformation. She says she's a Baltimore native and enjoys live music, using power tools and fighting robots. Hopefully she's not doing them all at the same time. Thank you very much for joining us, Audrey. And finally, a few words about me, your moderator. I'm Hamish. I'm a former IDC analyst. I'm a current IIoT World Advisory Board member, and I've been running my consulting practice from here in Munich, Germany since 2006. I help small and medium-sized industrial software vendors dramatically increase their growth efficiency. So basically focusing on their go-to-market strategy, sales, positioning, marketing, customer success, talent management, and overall productivity. And of course, I also moderate and MC events like this, both online and in the real world. If you'd like to know more about me, then please just look me up on LinkedIn. I'm Hamish McKenzie. There's only one of me in Munich as far as I'm aware, so you shouldn't find it difficult to find me. With all that said, audience, please get your questions into the Q&A function whenever they pop into your head. And with that, we're going to get started. And before we get into the discussion, we're going to run a quick poll. So, Powell, could you pull up the poll for us? Thank you very much. It's really good for us to get a feel for what stage you guys are at in the audience in your transformation journey. So while you submit your form for us for that, I'm going to get the conversation started. And if I can come to you first, Brian, as far as you're concerned, in your world, in terms of your clients, how are they thinking about their digital transformation strategy? Perhaps they're rethinking it compared to what they thought they might have been doing a few years ago. And why do you think it feels like, to some extent, a never-ending process for these manufacturers?
Yeah, thanks. Really good question. Yeah, I think it really depends on where the customer is coming from a maturity perspective. We have customers come to us from all over the spectrum, and also different sizes of companies too. But I think like one common thread that people come to us saying is, hey, continuous improvement. They want to improve the way their operations are, especially as there's new tools and technologies out on the marketplace that are ultimately better than they were 10, 20 years ago. And they're more approachable too. And so there's faster time to value. There's this human-centric element too that we're really seeing a lot of customers adopt is, how do we serve the people on the front line of operations? And then also how does that impact our bottom line in terms of the competitiveness against our peers in the market? And so I think that's like the main point for like your first question. But then in terms of why does it feel like a never-ending process? I think it really goes back to this ingrained principle of continuous improvement within manufacturing. There's always room for improvement. There's always this never-ending cycle of ways to be better and rethink problems and have a new perspective. And I also think within manufacturing, things aren't static. They're very fluid and they change all the time, whether it's your operations, the way that your line is set up, new product introductions, also new goals and strategies. So it's inherent to manufacturing in terms of always wanting to improve and be better. So that's kind of my initial perspective on that, but would love to hear from others or yourself.
All right, thanks for that, Brian. I think that word improvement is extremely important, just generally in terms of any of these, whether it's digital transformation or any kind of change or evolution, shall we say, within an organization. Framing it as improvement rather than change is a much more constructive and productive way to go about it, I think, because change, especially when you're considering the people involved, because change, a lot of people find change scary. Whereas if you're talking about improvement, well, no one can really argue about the need to improve, right? So I think that framing it like that is really important. Audrey, maybe I can just come to you from the client side. Are those kind of things that we were just talking about? Is that something you can identify with in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think digital transformation is a journey with no ending. That is the nature of manufacturing, like Brian said, but also the nature of software and digitization, right? There's always going to be new tools. There's always going to be new ways or new features that you can implement for the users. So I totally agree. I think there is no end to digital transformation. I think what's important is having the right strategy around building the right road for digital transformation so that it gets easier as you go along, right? And that right foundation is there in your sight. So I think that's been a big lesson that we've been able to learn, is setting that right foundation so that we can continue our digital transformation journey on the right footing.
Fantastic. All right, Uli, what are your clients saying about this?
Yeah, that's comparable opinions rising in my project, where we see different stages or maturities of digital transformation in the companies. But all of them have realized they have to go, they have at least to start, even if they are, let's say, coming from a very conservative background. But as we see the changing of people, you were talking about 10, 20 years ago, and I can see exactly the comparison, let's say 20 years ago, 15, 20 years, where we had a lot of, let's say, conservative, traditional people in front of us when selling IT or software systems. And nowadays, you have a much younger team of decision makers in front of us for these discussions. I'm not now selling, but consulting. And you find much more a higher openness towards digital tools. And as they have grown within the company, they are now in a position to say, yes, we have to go. And I'm now the manager, and I decide that we go. So this is an advantage and a clear and logic development.
Okay. David, any perspectives to add from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fully on the same page with the other colleagues here, but there is also a bit of a downside, or I would say another side to this story, is that especially if you look to digitalization from an operations perspective, that we have this engineering mindset. So we as engineers or as operations people, we are really used to, I would say, engineer, align, or build a new assets. And you know, if we take a look at from an engineering perspective, we try to plan exactly everything up front, right? We even do maybe simulations, whatever, right? But if we take the same mindset, and I call that an industry 3.0 mindset, if we take that mindset and we try to apply it to digital projects, that doesn't really fit, right? We make those plans. We need to request money. We need to get approval. Now, the ones who are going to give approval typically want to know, oh, perfect. So, what's your project plan? When will it be complete? As already said, it's never complete, etc., right? You have to assemble a team. You have to build something, and I've seen that way too many times, that people are just within that team building whatever idea they have, and at a certain point in time, they go like, okay, now it's ready to release it to our users, and then the users go like, no, no, that's not gonna work here, right? And then what I've seen at many places is that doing so, either you have management teams who go like, now I'm not gonna spend any more money in digitalization because told you so, it's gonna fail. Or you get this very high resistance from users, or, and that's of course a positive side, you also find these management teams who believe in this never-ending process, who try to, I would say, take agile ways of working from let's say the IT world or the data world, and go for these incremental changes. And this is where I see I would say the actual value, the actual good things happening. But it's still, I would say, in my opinion, or what I see, the minority of companies.
Okay, so kind of leading on from that, then I think nevertheless expectations are perhaps changing in some areas. So Brian, like from the perspective of frontline workers and engineers, how are those expectations changing, and are there different things happening now in that regard?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, take a look at just what we have around in our day-to-day lives. I was listening to a colleague the other day, in his comparisons, like you can order a taxi or an Uber on your phone. You can order a pizza on your phone. You can do everything on your phone. But when you walk into typically a manufacturing environment, it's whiteboards and paper. So as soon as you walk through that doorway, everything is back 25 years. And so the expectations of workers, of our frontline operators and engineers today is completely different. And so the expectation is that they have to have tools to do their jobs more efficiently. And it's frustrating if you don't. Like, I don't know, man, we're talking many continents right now on a webinar. Like, this type of technology typically does not exist in a manufacturing environment. And so they've typically been left behind in terms of like the tools and technology that they have to do their jobs effectively. And so that's really where we see a lot of the opportunity. And I think, David, it plays off of your comment too. It's like, there's like a top down and a bottoms up approach, right? You can't take this industry 3.0, this, hey, we have to go live and just wait until, we have to have everything perfect to go live. You can push things into the shop floor and make incremental changes and do it fast and get feedback from operators and the people that are actually using the product and get that bottoms up buy-in. I think that's another expectation too, is having a voice to affect change in terms of how you, like, the tools that you're using, and being able to make incremental changes quickly.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's move on to talk about some examples in terms of the strategies that customers are finding useful and effective, of course, most importantly, in kind of identifying and prioritizing which are the high ROI projects during this digital transformation journey. So Brian, what are you seeing?
Yeah, again, I think it's having the top-down vision to say, hey, here's our goals, but then empowering the teams that are closest to the problems to go solve problems that actually matter to them. And so, ROI is kind of a tricky word, right? Because sometimes it's hard to quantify what is the ROI of an incremental improvement, especially if it's very easy in terms of hard savings. There's also like this soft savings component too. It's like this just more nebulous, like, we're doing things better and it's hard to attribute that. But what we often do is we work with customers to identify, a proof of value type of project to get off the ground, and to show that this solution does work and that it does meet the goals of the business. But then it also gets buy-in from the operators, right, from the people on the shop floor, and it empowers the engineers to actually go and solve problems. And so, yeah, that's kind of my main thought in terms of how do we prioritize some of this. And many different ways to around sophistication. It can be as simple as like a 4-block, high impact, low impact versus high effort, low effort. And sometimes that's just an easy whiteboard exercise, or do it on virtual stickies, just to start stratifying where should we go after first. And that's usually a good way to kind of get the foundation going to prove that value, and then you can get into a longer term roadmap for full digital transformation.
Okay, and I think you have an example from a renewable energy manufacturer.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I mean, one of our customers, renewable energy manufacturer, who actually spoke at one of our forums earlier this year, shared a really good example where the way that they thought about it was they wanted to implement an MES. They'd already gone through fits and spurts of digital transformation, but they understood that what they needed to do was what they thought, and MES, I'll never forget this. MES for them stood for minimizing emails and spreadsheets. I'd never heard that before, but I think that's pretty great. What they saw was that there was, information transfer was between people, and it was inefficient, and that and this old way of working was not sufficient for the sophistication that they had in their vision and goals, and so that they knew that there had to be new tools out there. And so they went along and had a cross-functional team of building an MES using a very ecosystem of applications. And it's really cool to see. And they, had clear metrics that they were trying to quantify along the way, some hard savings, some soft savings. But they also had to, do the classic, IIoT divide, bridge that gap and have both teams playing on the same team. But ultimately that was that's like a really tangible example of how they thought about ROI and where they were going first, and what they needed to tackle. All
right, thank you, David. I think you've got an opinion about the ROI on this in this topic. Right?
Yeah, I have an unpopular opinion on ROI. So don't get me wrong. In the end, whether it's an MES, whether it's a data platform, you need to deliver. You need to identify your why, and typically it's either about becoming more competitive, or it's something quality related, or it's about attracting people and retaining people. This, what you said, Brian, having the fact that if somebody young comes in the plant, they don't have the feeling that they're transported back in time, or obviously compliance reasons. So you need to work on that. Now, what I've seen is that in the beginning of these projects, it's typically extremely hard to start quantifying an ROI immediately. Yeah. I would say even more if we talk about a platform approach, whether it's a platform to hold MES data or it's a platform to hold sensor data, IoT data, whatever. Typically, the platform will never give you a quantifiable ROI. So that means that either you should select certain projects where you know chances of getting or finding an ROI are high, or you should have a vision and management team who accepts the fact that you can actually defer the ROI for a while and only come back to that later. And one of the things, so when I was still working at BASF, we used a digital tool to register temperature in cracking furnaces. So yeah, cracking furnaces, very hot temperature, extremely expensive to buy sensors to put in them. So operators obviously used temperature guns. Now, it actually took us, I don't know how many years, but it took us a couple of years until we really fine-tuned that entire process of shooting the temperatures, entering them in the digital tool, using that data to predict the operation of the furnace, in this case, the decoking of the when decoking needs to be executed. And only after a couple of years we were able to say like, oh wow, now we can actually start increasing the I would say the furnace cycles. And in that case, I was actually really lucky to have a management team on the other side who accepted, I would say, that time between talking about basic investments, and being able to showcase an actual ROI. And I really, really believe you need that.
I'd love to jump in there, Hamish, if you don't mind. I agree. It seems like a tough nut to crack to find an ROI with a digital platform, but we have also been able to do it, right? I think that, at Stanley Black & Decker, we've certainly had some leeway to find what that ROI is. We knew it was there, but we've really found some significant ROI and short-term payback when you think about the cost that comes with digital transformation. We're talking 3 years potentially for some of the projects that we've done to achieve payback and ROI status in our facilities. And a lot of that comes from time savings. So we find that a lot of our plants are doing stuff on paper, are handwriting stuff, are double touching, triple touching, quadruple touching pieces of data because it's disparate systems, it's on a whiteboard or whatever it might be. So when we can find those things that we can reduce, that's what we go after. But it's also really dependent, the true ROI, I can give you as many tools as you want. You have to use them, right? So it's super dependent on actual utilization. So you have to craft your digital transformation tools and strategy to be able to see utilization and alert when utilization that you're expecting isn't happening, so that the teams around you can help reinforce the utilization of those tools, right? But we've even seen some pretty significant ROI with reduction in time to competency, right? Through digital training versus on-the-job training, we've been able to increase operator efficiency and productivity at a much steeper curve than a traditional training method, which means they make more product faster, sooner, right? So there's definitely ways to go about it, but it's about finding the right way to do it and ensure that folks are actually sustaining utilization after you're gone, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think that plays into the next question I wanted to ask, which is around consensus building, right? So people need to be working together right through the organization in order to make these things happen effectively, I guess. So Brian, have you got an example of that consensus building, how that's worked at a customer?
I think this is the hardest nut to crack, and where we see customers potentially trip and stumble a bit. Because it's not only, I mentioned before, it's like to be successful, it has to be top down and bottom up. And even if you do have the top down vision, then it often I've seen is like it's difficult going site to site too. There's like the consensus building across sites and like the stakeholders at individual sites and making sure that they're aware of the tools and the benefits and how you know, what's in it for them really. And then of course you have the entire all of the operators. But if you do it successfully, and I think, you know, Audrey, I'm sure you have many war stories here. You know, it's a beautiful thing to see. And it can be done, but it does take a strong vision, strategy, the right tool, and then also just like that enforcement, that feedback that Audrey was explaining of like, hey, when something isn't happening, how do you reinforce and have the your central team go in and help reinforce the tools.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of my customers in the last years, they really have the approval top down from the management go, and then we jumped in as consultants from the side more or less and said, okay, let's have a look at the fit gap analysis. What is wrong in brackets, or what is to be improved in your processes, in your production processes? So we incorporated into our discussions and workshops people from the line. We had the maintenance manager, we had the production head saying, okay, where do you see gaps in transfer of data, in efficiency, whatever? So we took this and ranked it, and by this procedure integrated all these people in the way to reach a consensus, to reach a commitment to these projects. And we worked out very quickly some ideas for improvement use cases, and had the argumentation, you have to have a platform. Then we install the use cases, and with this use case, you, Mr. Mrs. XYZ, you will have this and this opportunity. You can transfer your data faster. You will have less work, and less work does not automatically mean people set out, but it means your capacity, your power, and your know-how, you are able to dedicate to other jobs which are necessary, and not to the data transfer from typing Excel printed files into another system by hand, which happened there. And we show them, okay, we can connect them, the two systems or three systems, and you will be free. You can do something more relevant according to your know-how level. So this argumentation creates a lot of commitment and dedication to the overall project.
Okay, fantastic. Before I started talking about improvement instead of change, when I wasn't implementing digital transformations at clients, but I was implementing transformations in terms of their go-to-market strategies. And one of the things that I always tried to implement was what I called at the time a change champion. So to make sure that there was someone within the organization who was responsible for being the evangelist, if you like, or and trying to kind of see where the problems are and get people to buy into the whole thing. I think there must be opportunities for a similar thing to happen within these types of projects, right? Brian, do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So I think what we often see is it's absolutely critical to have what we call, in our context, a tulip champion. But we often see that person's role is extremely influential to help do a couple things. It's mainly bridging gaps, right? It's bridging gaps across different teams. Again, usually there's like a communication gap between IT and OT in terms of aligning goals, and also like the ways of doing business. New technologies sometimes make IT teams a little bit uncomfortable in terms of giving up some amount of control in terms of being able to implement solutions, but that's healthy and that's okay. But it's a conversation that needs to happen. And then, I can't count on way too many examples of like that specific like role is absolutely required between the IT and the OT thing. But then there's also this thing that I've started to notice around the different vocabulary and dialects between teams. What a term might mean to somebody in a leadership position means very different than somebody in like a management position at a site level or even an operator. and then you start bringing in like a global perspective of just terms and like how are we aligned in terms of like what are the goals across, you know, what might be common in the US is a very different meaning in Germany versus China, and making sure that there's like that consistent translation and understanding of the vocabulary and the goals and objectives. And usually that champion is somebody who's able to kind of navigate that consensus building and bridging those gaps.
Okay, well, David, what about your perspective on the IT/OT divide, if you like?
Yeah, this has to be my sweet spot of being the IT/OT insider. But Brian, and I would say from my perspective, the difference even between teams, between shifts,
Yes.
like you might have. I've been in plants where now I would say with fully automated control a little bit less, but the first thing when the new shift comes up, first thing they do is they start changing settings in their SCADA or before that on I would say the physical boards, because they went like, yeah, those colleagues from the previous team, yeah, they don't know how to. It's even on that level. Now for I would say regarding IT/OT or IT/OT convergence, so people often say like, is IT/OT convergence the ultimate epiphany or whatever you want to call it? And I say no. For me, I don't really believe in this full convergence, really from PLC programmers to the ones who are using or administering the I don't know, the Azure cloud, whatever, in your company. So first of all, it is not about taking each other's territory. IT working together is not about I claim this part of the world and or you claim that part back. Absolutely not. It's not about we are more agile or we have better technology or we understand the process better or whatever types of things you hear. It's finding, in my opinion, and it might sound very stupid, but just finding ways to cooperate in a meaningful way, which means that probably you need to somehow scope that cooperation. Because for, I don't know, cybersecurity, you might cooperate much more intensively because typically IT owns the cybersecurity. Well, the CISO typically owns the cybersecurity, so that dribbles down. But for these types of applications, MES applications, data platforms, you somehow need to scope that cooperation and then just start working on it. Understanding each other's position, understanding each other's strengths, understanding each other's way of working. And that sounds really easy, but it's always the best first step to take towards something which might become a convergence-alike organization in the future.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah,
creating common teams where people from production, from OT, including their thinking, their mindset, engineering, mechanical mindset, and the IT people with their, let's say, network infrastructure-oriented mindset, and a lot of wordings, abbreviations that they bring into this discussion, where I've seen the engineers on the other side of the table, they said, okay, I'm out, I don't understand. And I had to bring them together and said, yeah, but please, IT, go a little down and explain what it means, what practically it would mean for the business side. And the business side, they had to leave their restrictions or their fear aside. A lot of the engineers say, hey, this is software IT I'm not in. And this is both sides to have to come together for a discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, I know that the audience always loves to hear about real world examples. So Audrey, I wanted to come to you and see if you can give us a bit more detail about how it's actually worked within your organization in terms of, you know, what role the leadership has played, the whole top-down versus bottom-up discussion. How do you get IT people to feel comfortable dealing with these transformations? And also, particularly, how do you measure the effectiveness? So you were talking about ROI a little bit before. So yeah, maybe you can just talk a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah, let me touch first on the ITOT portion, then I'll kind of talk about the top down, bottom up. So, I've lived through both versions at Stanley Black & Decker, where OT was outside of the IT organization in the business, and now OT is within the IT organization, not in the business. And we partner obviously very closely with our ITOT organization, right? And it took years for us to get to the point where I truly trust and feel like I have valuable partners in our ITOT organization, right? It started off very much, no, stay off my lawn. You can't do this. Cybersecurity, don't even think about it, right? But now we've gotten to a point where, I'll jump through some of the stupid hoops, my opinion that they're stupid hoops, that IT puts in front of us, right? Because it means that I get other things on the other side, right? So there's a give and a take there. So we have done a lot of work and due diligence to make IT feel comfortable. We're transparent about what we're doing with IT, which I think is maybe a departure from what we had done before, where it was kind of like, don't ask, don't tell, right? But that's where we needed to go to actually move the needle for our sites, from an infrastructure standpoint, from a funding standpoint, from a support standpoint, right? We've all seen, you put in a new software and then you leave and there's no support, no one knows how to work it, and it falls by the wayside, right? So you really have to actually think and bring IT along in that partnership, because I'll be frank, I don't want to support a system for 10 years in a plant. That's IT's job, right? It's my job to go in there and set it up and make them the right system. But there needs to be a partnership there for sure. And you have to actually, like you said, David, make the effort to understand how to work with them, because it pays dividends for eons, right? So for us, we've done a lot of that legwork, and I talk to my IT partners all day, every day. They're an extension of my team. They get OpEx shirts and swag, right? They wear it to the plants. We go to the plants together, right? So really making them an extension of your team is really key there. And then when it comes to tops down versus bottom up, we have a pretty varied landscape of sites within Stanley, over 100 manufacturing locations, everything from a small mom and pop fab shop with 80 employees to a 6,000 person assembly facility, right? We make everything from a rivet that goes into a Tesla battery to a riding zero-turn lawnmower, right? So our processes, our equipment, our PLCs, our networks look super different across the board, right? And so historically, we'd had a lot of grassroots or site-led, independent, hey, I found this software, I'm going to use it. Great. Now we've got 100 standards and 100 different sites, and no one centrally knows how to support them or use them, right? So we've had a lot of good tops-down support to stop some of that stuff. Hey, let's centralize and all work and push in the right direction, right? And then where my team can come in is, hey, we've got these set of standards and behaviors outside of digital that we want every plant to do. We want every plant to do tiered meetings, SQDCP. We want every plant to do 5S in the same way, right? So we have these kind of foundational behaviors, and from an operational excellence or lean standpoint, that we want our sites to adopt and lean into and display and show us. And then my team can come in and say, how do we take a lot of these activities and behaviors and make them digital? That's what people want anyway. You don't want to do a 5S audit on paper. You don't want to do a tier board on paper, right? So how do we make standard digital tools that help enable these standard behaviors that we want our sites to be adopting? It makes it easier for them to adopt, and it makes us centrally easier for us to see that they actually are doing what they said they should be doing, right? So we have that kind of top-down charter of, hey, everybody needs to standardize on these core manufacturing behaviors, foundational manufacturing behaviors, right? But then when we look across our sites, a 5S audit in an 80-person shop, a little bit different than a 5S audit in a 6,000-person shop. So we're able to kind of work to customize to a certain degree with each plant's needs, or give them the tools to customize to a certain degree. Hey, you added a new line. Now you're able to easily do that in the system. You don't have to come see my team to be able to add a new line into your system, right? And so I think the other thing that we've been able to do kind of as a forcing function that I think has been a real key unlock for us is every month, I report out to my boss on certain metrics around not only deployment status of the solutions, but also utilization of the solutions. You could argue, and my team loves to argue with me about this, we're not responsible for utilization, right? My team's not in the plant using the tools, but we are responsible for designing a solution that they want to use, right? So it's a really good leading indicator. If we see utilization drop off, something's wrong, right? Somebody needs to go and check on that site and understand, did you lose somebody? You can't log in, what's happening, right? So I have that kind of cadence monthly with my leadership team. Then my leadership team has a cadence with supply chain leadership monthly, right? Looking at some of those same metrics across our whole OpEx organization. And we have a monthly steering committee with the sites that we're actively working in, their plant managers, the management level above our plants, my boss, and then my leadership team, my team's leaders, to look at things like utilization, progress, issues that might be happening. And that's a really good, healthy thing for you to do, because it not only signals to the sites, hey, we care enough about this, but it also signals to the site's management chain, this is something we need you to be looking at. If you see utilization drop, we're going to talk about it every month, and you can help reinforce with your site leaders. You need to make sure you're using this, right? And we're even building KPIs where the only way they'll be able to report that KPI is if they continue to use our solutions, right? So really operationalizing and ingraining our solutions. That starts with finding the right use case. You have to build something that people want to use and is useful for them, right? So for us, it's really been around those foundational and standardized behaviors. How can we make a digital way for our sites to lean into that?
All right, fantastic. And that's a perfect segue into the last section of the discussion now, where we want to really dig into this more operational side and how to engage people in the process, particularly operators. David, I think you've got some insight into how that worked at BASF, right?
So yeah, a bit to Audrey's points, and indeed an example I've been active at myself is you need to find that balance between giving something and then asking users to pull more, because you can't just keep on throwing stuff over the fence. There needs to be some adoption as well. And I started calling that I would say the push-pull model. The push-pull model is something very simple, right? First of all, you do need some central teams or some side teams or some expertise teams who come up with a innovative idea. We've seen that over and over again, that a lot of these real bottom-up ideas, it's very hard to really implement I would say a bottom-up idea, because typically you don't have the budgets or the technical capabilities. So you need to have something you push over the fence together with some key users. They need to adapt it. But at that point in time, I think it's extremely important to create pull first from these early adopters, to create some pull and go like, but we have this idea as well, or this might be a high priority thing or something we want to solve. Now, just having this pull is not enough. And this is the point in time where you need to push again and always push a bit further, wait for some pull, push a bit further. Now, there is one downside of this approach, and that's, it's an IT term, but I'm going to use it. It's technical debt. When you go in this approach where you give something and then you extend, and you give something more and you extend, there are a couple of things which can bring your project down, and one of them is technical debt, being that you have no overall vision, and you're just adding some code, adding some applications, but by doing so, there is a big chance of that you're creating an application which doesn't scale any longer. And you need to be really, really careful in this approach, that while you need the push and the pull, you also need the scalability of your solution in mind as well. And one of these things, and when I go back already 12, 13 years ago, when I introduced the first mobile devices, I did it exactly in this way, so I just focused my work on one shift team. I wanted to make sure that the application worked perfectly in that one shift, and then we extended to all the shifts in that one plant. And once that was working, what I actually did is I didn't went to other plants and sell the solution. I actually started an internal marketing project where people from that first plant started explaining how it changed their work. And what actually happened is that solution then got adopted by, in my case, 50 chemical plants on one side without me having to sell once.
Very good. Okay. Cool. Brian, how do you approach this with to the customers? Because obviously acceptance is also a huge, very important for a successful project, right?
Yeah, I really agree with what David said. I mean, it's brilliant having not having to sell to individual plants, right? Because you get the buy-in from you have people within your own sites, like the site, like the end users that are advocating for how it changed their lives. That's massively important, but more from like the humans at the center aspect, right? Like the people that are actually interacting with the application. You know, one thing I'm really proud of at Tulip is, you know, our product is a no-code application platform. So it's like building a PowerPoint, right? It's super easy to build that application and then deploy it immediately to the shop floor and get feedback. And so what I'm proud of and I love seeing when we go to a customer site is when the operators understand that they can very easily request a change, right? Like they can ask for like, hey, it would be easier. I'm confused on this step. It'd be easier if the application was laid out in this way, or if this, you know, if we had an extra button to request for feedback or had an and on here. And then instead of waiting, you know, months for a Jira ticket and some, you know, from code to be developed, it can be pushed in minutes, right? It's not a months, it's a months to minutes type of conversation. And they can see that immediately. And it goes back to what we discussed earlier. It's continuous improvement. And when you have operators that understand, you know, people that are actually doing the work, that understand that their voice can be heard and that the tool can make their lives easier, and they're also surfacing their feedback, it's a beautiful thing to see.
And it's almost like a virtuous circle then, right?
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, we have built into our standard applications a feedback button for our operators, right? And we have a really high say-do ratio with that button where a feedback comes in, it actually does make a Jira ticket for us automatically, Brian, but we get that feedback from the operators and they might say, hey, this machine is running, but we're not seeing part counts, or, you know, I need a new downtime reason, or whatever it might be. And then we can act on it really quickly. And it's super great to have that direct feedback from your actual users built into your system. And I think that also signals to them, because we've lived through, and many of our operators have lived through failed digital implementations before that were kind of shoved on them. They weren't consulted about it. They don't have any say in it, and they hate it and they stop using it, or it doesn't ever work. It's really signals to them like, hey, we're here, we're listening, we care about you. And when we see you have some feedback for us, we're either going to tell you, we're not going to implement that, or yeah, great idea. Next week, you're going to see it in the platform, right? So for us, having that feedback loop there and available has been really important for getting that buy-in with the operators.
And I think the lesson is that you can't communicate too much. I mean, obviously it needs to be structured, but over communication is way, 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 way better than under communication. And that's the same in any kind of transformation project.
Yeah. Marketing, internal marketing is so hugely important.
Yeah.
Having a nice logo, having the t-shirts and the whatever, but it's so hugely important. Yeah. And I would say for typical engineers, we're not so used to that. We have to get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
not
absolutely.
only the engineers, but also the IT people have get used to it. They are also sometimes in a tunnel.
Yep.
And to make clear for acceptance improvement, to make clear you give in and you compromise in a certain way on your data structure, on your signal, whatever, for the benefit of scalability. And then in another site, there will be developed a use case very successfully, and not out of the blue, but by internal communication. I had made this experience, or had the specialty to get to know this. In the overnext management meeting, the VP of another site stood up and said, "Hey, I have heard from my team about your successes in this and this site,
Yeah.
and I want this as well. So what better can happen that this communication runs on the shop floor from one side to the next and raises then up to the management. And the circle turns.
I had that conversation, literally that conversation at a certain point in time in the restaurant, in the company restaurant. The VP just walked up to me and said, like, David, how can we get that thing as soon as possible? I went like, okay, job done, you know.
Yeah.
What more success can you get?
It's a good problem to have.
In your work?
Yeah, dream scenario. Just one more point on this, and then I wanted to go to some questions before we run out of time. If a company does manage to start doing this successfully and can prove and starts getting a reputation for leading in this digital transformation, and that should, in theory at least, also help get the right kind of new people into the organization as well, right? It should make that organization more attractive as an employer. So I don't know, Uli, have you seen examples of that?
Yeah, we have seen a lot of examples like this in the last years, especially when, let's say, the demand on specialists, on very know-how people is there, and you cannot, for your digital transformation, attract these IT-based people with the know-how on software and IT and IIoT platforms, etc. Because these guys, if you have a center or if you're out of any industrial center, these guys do have so much opportunities. They go to very well-known companies like, let's say, IBM, SAP, whatever. And if you are a manufacturer and you still have a quite conservative touch, just in your branding, in your HR branding, it's difficult to attract those people. And so internal communication again, we transferred success stories about our projects into HR. They transformed them into marketing capable wording, sentences, pictures, and then they got into the bonding fairs to get new people, to get students attracted, and they said, hey, we are developing and you can be part of our team for many opportunities within our company. So you're not into an IT structure like IBM, SAP. Okay, you have a lot of colleagues that know a lot, but here you have the opportunity, your know-how is unique, and you can really raise within our company and in our structures because of your unique know-how.
You know,
Just
I think digital is, my opinion, table stakes. If you want to be a company in 30 years and you're not going digital, you're not going to be a company in 30 years. I hate to break it to you, millennials, Gen Z, we walk into a company that's running stuff on paper, we're going to walk right back in, right? So like for me, like you got to be even bolder and stronger in that. And like you have to do it if you want to survive, especially if you want to attract the younger workforce, which I'm assuming every company does, right? Like it's a table stakes. You have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We've had a question from David Siegel to Audrey specifically, who would like you to maybe talk about one specific project that was successful and talk kind of specifically about the ROI that you got from that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you know, the project that my team's been piloting in 2 sites this year is really an end-to-end digitization of the shop floor from a safety, quality, delivery, people standpoint, cost standpoint. So SQDCP, where we've basically we remediated the IIoT infrastructure. We're putting in new switches, putting in the right network capabilities, segmenting everything, connecting the assets, hardlining into the PLCs, putting in sensors to get part counts, and then putting in a layer of applications to help contextualize those downtimes or say what SKU is running if we can't get it right out of the PLC, or to record your quality issues or scrap stuff out of our ERP system, and then surface all of that back to the shop floor leaders and the plant management leaders in digital tier boards, digital SQDCP boards, right? So really focusing on digitizing what they need to be doing every day anyway, right? So not looking for a problem that my shiny new technology can fix, but looking for pain points that our sites already have, getting a hold of their data, knowing how many parts they made, right? And solving for that first, because if you're a plant manager and you don't know how many parts this line made that shift, and you find out a week later, why are you looking at vibration sensors? Right? You probably need to know how many parts you're making every shift first, right? So for us, it was starting with that very basic use case, digitizing that to make it easier and give our sites more value-added time, less time chasing data, analyzing data, and just seeing the results right there so they can drive a decision with it, right? So that's been our big focus this year in 2 of our large sites in North America, and that has really driven significant ROI. And that's the one that I was referencing that has like a 3-year payback and super significant time savings because of the way that we have designed this solution. The manufacturing engineers save time. They don't have to do time studies anymore. We get that automatically off the machines. We know how much time it takes to make each SKU, and we've got months of historical data to show it, right? That's eliminating hours of work every week from our manufacturing engineers. We look at our value stream leaders or our supervisors. We're spending hours every shift reporting stuff, entering it into different systems. All of that's taken away from them now, and it's automatic for them, right? So for us, that has been our big focus and what has been successful for us, and what we will continue to do in the rest of our sites, or at least our high priority sites, is lay that very basic digital foundation that, is the speedometer on your car before we look at other shinier use cases, right? But also, not only is it the speedometer on your car, but it also fixes that infrastructure in our plants, which was a really big key for us as well, because a lot of our plants had kind of really aged out of the infrastructure that was in them.
Okay, fantastic example. Thank you. All right, we're running out of time, but I want to quickly go around the room. All the other questions are basically to do with ROI. So how do you talk to about ROI when there's no clear, at least within an organization, they can't see it, or they've never done it before, so they don't know what it's going to be. So Brian, how do you address that subject with customers? 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Part with identifying what the pain is, right? And then coming to an understanding of, hey, what's a reasonable benchmark? Oftentimes our customers don't have the data to support what is a benchmark, or what is a baseline? Sorry, what is the baseline? So at least coming to an agreement on what is a reasonable baseline, so that we have something to establish on, like, hey, this is a lever we're going to pull, and this is a reasonable assumption for when we go back and say, look at all of this information, look how we affected change, look how we allowed your supervisors to make better decisions. This is how, this is a way to quantify that in some meaningful way that's mutually agreed upon too, right? Because if it comes from us as a partner / vendor, it's less meaningful as the customer having the explicit buy-in in terms of agreement.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. David?
Same as what Brian said. So using some benchmarks you have, and then I'll say prove them, by doing a small scale pilot. It's always tricky to extrapolate, but it's the best you can do at that point in time.
Okay, so start small, but start is basically the message.
Yeah, start small, but simply start and think big, because you need to think where you're heading towards. Really important.
Okay, Uli?
Where is the scalability effect?
Yeah, Uli? Oh, I think we're about
same as my other colleagues. Just get some examples that you can extrapolate from shop floor, from people on site.
Okay, fantastic. Guys, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's been a fascinating session, so thank you very, very much to all of you for your insights, for your knowledge. Thank you especially to Brian and Tulip, who are the sponsors of this session. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to make these events happen at all, so thank you very, very much for that. And of course, thank you to our audience. I hope you found it as interesting and as engaging as we did. We will get you some written answers to those questions we didn't get to. And with that, it's now time to move on to today's next session, which is Bridging the Gap, Strategies for Integrating Legacy Systems with Modern Technologies, sponsored today by Influx Data. Thank you very much. I've got one more session later on, so if you're joining me for that, I'll see you then. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.